Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the DubCast podcast. Today we welcomed on John Bollman. You can find him on Twitter at John Bollman11. John is one of the marquee names in the baseball handicapping space. He has worked in collegiate organizations. He has worked in Major League Baseball organizations. He is truly a wealth of knowledge. Today you'll learn how he finds value in both Major League Baseball and in college baseball and how his processes differ from one level to the next. John, what's going on, my friend?
Dude, doing well. Excited for a lot of baseball today.
I know, no kidding. We got a packed slate. This is beautiful. This is paradise for you, that's for sure.
Definitely. We got 2 leagues going. I really can't ask for much more.
That's awesome. Well, let's get this over with so we can get you back to watching games. But I just wanted to, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a busy man, especially this time of year, handicapping. You got college baseball going. We got KBO. We got MLB. We got all that good stuff. But first and foremost, I just want to dive into kind of your background. Where did this passion for baseball, generally speaking, start? And how did you get your start in handicapping it specifically?
Yeah, so I guess I've always been interested in baseball. I've been playing since I was about 3. Played up through high school, but once I was in high school, I wasn't very big. I was 5'1", 135 my junior year of high school, so I wasn't getting too much attention. So I could have played D3 somewhere, but I kind of wanted to value my education and have a little more fun than playing 4 more years and knowing I wasn't going to go pro. So I did that, went to Tulane, undergraduate, and then I realized that there was a graduate program for statistics. I've always been interested in statistics and baseball. Found that out, applied to the program, got into the program, immediately realized what I was learning was transferable to analytics in baseball. So I started working towards that, applying to a bunch of MLB teams. I talked to the Tulane baseball head coach and asked if he needed a quantitative analyst. So I worked with them for that season. And then parlayed that job into a role with the Blue Jays, ended up being player development and high performance for the Blue Jays. And that brought me to CBS now. And so now I'm just a baseball analyst and do a lot of handicapping as well.
That's beautiful. Morphing 2 things that you love, crunching numbers and being involved in the game. So good for you. How about, I would love for you to build off of what it even means to be a quant in the baseball world. I know people have seen the movie Moneyball and they may have, a high level understanding, but how are you able to dive into numbers that the naked eye does not understand in any stretch of the imagination?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I guess basically I've just always been interested in statistics, kind of box scores and reading them. And the way that baseball has transformed lately, we kind of get advanced analytics now. People are trying to come up with new ways to measure things essentially every day, every season. So we get new stats like weighted on base average, weighted runs created, stuff like that, FIP for pitchers. And so basically what I got into is I was very interested in all these numbers and I kind of wanted to learn more about them. So I learned about all these numbers. I learned their relationship to all of the old numbers that we would use. And essentially what I did, one of my roles with the Blue Jays was communicating those numbers, those new types of stats to the coaches, to the players in a way that they would understand. So by using a traditional statistic or explaining to a concept, a baseball concept to a coach. So that's how I got into the analytics side.
It's hilarious that you say that. I played baseball my whole life, played in college, played in the Orioles minor league system for 3 years, and don't know what any of those stats mean. Reason being is because a guy like you was relaying, hey, you're swinging at too many balls, let's swing at strikes. I'm sure there's some crazy algorithm and some statistic that I couldn't pronounce that actually determines what your strike zone management is, but that's where you step in. And in terms of parlaying that into the ability to handicap at the incredibly high level that you do, what does a day in the life of looking at these numbers and crunching them in terms of building a slate look like?
Yeah, well, I think it definitely helps me in terms of knowing the ins and outs of both a college organization and a major league professional organization. So I know kind of how they work, how they think, how they go about their routines, how travel affects them, stuff like that, how certain head coaches think, and that helped me in Major League Baseball as well. A day in the life is kind of just waking up, doing a lot of baseball research, honestly. It's really just trying to find anything that you possibly can't find in terms of statistics and in terms of advanced analytics. So a lot of things that I do, I use weighted on base average to look at lineups. I like to look at splits, left versus right. Obviously, this early in the season, it's a little harder to look at splits because you don't have too many at-bats against mainly lefties so far. But I like to look at bullpens as well, bullpen ERA and how that's affecting teams. I like to look at bullpen usage as well. That's a big thing with me. Knowing when a team isn't going to pitch a reliever 3 times in 4 nights or 3 days in a row. So those are very big factors that I look at, and those are kind of the main factors that I account for when handicapping.
Super helpful, and we're gonna have to do a seminar after this of what weighted on base and all that good stuff means. One thing that I've noticed thus far in the season is that you have absolutely dominated handicapping college baseball. I am seeing here 185 and 149 plus 26.9 units. There isn't as much data when looking at a college baseball slate compared to an MLB season where there's 162 games, there are 32 teams, and the data is far more advanced. How have you been able to handicap college baseball so well with a limited data set?
Yeah, I think that it actually helps us in a way. I think that because data isn't widely available, because books don't care about it as much, because they're not taking as much money in on this sport, that they don't have the best lines. So I think it's very easy to take advantage of these lines because a lot of the lines are way off, especially when you get towards the lower teams in D1 college baseball. Those mid-majors are massive, especially knowing trends with mid-majors. Also, as you know, baseball is a sport where literally anything can happen on any day. You could go out there, hit 4 balls 105 miles an hour, and they could all be right at somebody, or you could hit 4 balls 50 miles an hour, and they could all be in the perfect spot, and you can get on base. So knowing that these mid-majors are more than capable of beating these ACC and SEC teams is a big thing, but also knowing when these ACC and SEC teams are really going all in, Pac-12 teams as well going all in and trying to get those wins. So knowing the days of the week as well, knowing how much depth each team has, because a game on a Friday night is completely different than a game on a Tuesday night because of how much depth there are in college baseball teams. So that's a big factor as well.
That's one thing that I've noticed is that you find tremendous value across the board when it comes to your college baseball slates. And there are times where you'll tip a play. Last night, you tipped Stanford at, I think, minus 125, and they closed at minus 190. And so I think that might have been you moving the market. But you have picked, I've had more plus money winners since tailing you than I've ever experienced before. Is that just a testament to the value that can be had when analyzing college baseball at this level?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And yeah, pretty much, I think there's a lot of value to be had, especially on certain days of the week and certain teams. Home teams have also been absolutely mopping up in college baseball this season. Being at home is a massive advantage. So knowing when you have those home underdogs to take advantage of is a massive play there. Especially midweeks, you have certain guys that are pitching certain times. So I really like playing underdogs, especially those home dogs. And then knowing which teams, which mid-majors, are good, which mid-majors maybe might not be good but have the talent is big. And then knowing certain pitchers and when certain pitchers can come in, because I guarantee the books don't look at what relievers are available. And I know they look at starters sometimes, but sometimes you don't get a starter announced. So it's really all about the staff. So it's very crucial to know.
I want to transition to MLB. We've made it very clear that you frickin' dominate betting college baseball. In terms of betting MLB, obviously the markets are flooded right now with action, and it's been awesome to see with the rule changes, there could be more interest in watching and eventually betting baseball across the board. Let's start with those rule changes. Do you like them? Do you not like them? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so as somebody who watches baseball all day, every day anyway, as soon as the game ends, I'm putting on another game, right? So the timing doesn't matter too much to me because as soon as one game ends, I'm putting on another game anyway, right? So it's literally just watching more baseball for me. That being said, I do actually think I'm enjoying the shifts because it's kind of the best of both worlds if we're looking at it so far, right? Because we're not having three fielders necessarily on one side of the infield, but you can have a fielder like directly up the middle and have essentially three fielders on like a half of a side, So I think some teams are able to take advantage of that. And I think that's creating a lot of strategy in baseball. And I think that's super interesting. In terms of the bases, that's not really affecting things too much. I think that's just more of a safety issue, which is a good thing.
And anecdotally, how does this change the way you do handicap? Because from a hitter's perspective, no shift, potentially more open room on the field. More open room on the field means more opportunity to get hits. More hits means more runs. Has this changed the way that you build slates in any way?
So yes and no. Honestly, baseball has been changing pretty much every year, with different things happening. So for example, the sticky substance ban a couple years back, they did that after about a month and a half through the season. So then we kind of had to realize which pitchers were good without it and which pitchers could get by without it. Last year we had no spring training or 1 week of spring training. So we knew how long certain pitchers would go and that they would be building up for a while. So there's always like a different factor that it seems like every season with MLB recently. Then before that, there's COVID. There wasn't a short season and then there weren't any fans. So it always seems like there's a new factor to handicap for. So yes, it is always changing, but at the same time, things are always changing in sports and in baseball, it seems like recently, especially with rules and especially with the way that certain things are happening. So I don't change anything of what I do, but I do have to be aware of it. And if something's changing in the game, then I have to be aware that it's changing as well.
Yeah, and the last one that you didn't touch upon, which you have handicapped as of late, are stolen bases and the rule change with pickovers and pitchers being limited to 2 before they essentially have to go home or pick the guy off. Do you see any future for you in continuing grabbing these, high plus money stolen baselines?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So for those of you that don't know, a lot of my subscribers and we were doing sort of an experiment, playing low money on stolen base props and, fading certain pitchers who allowed the most stolen bases last year, certain things like that. They were pretty successful the first few days. The past couple days, they haven't been as successful. I think I'm still going to put them out and definitely going to keep being aware of when these certain guys that we want to attack, these certain starters on the mound, especially with stolen bases. But the thing is, with stolen bases, there are so many factors that go into it. And it's wild how many things have to go right. It's not just getting on base, right? It's the score of the game. It's the pitcher. It's the count. It's who's up next. It's how many outs there are. So literally all these factors have to all shift in like a combination for it to hit one like correct spot and then the runner can go, right? So there are just so many factors that have to go right for this to happen. But the thing is, when it does happen, if we stack a certain team, it happens. So there will be one team that can get 3-4 stolen bases in a game. They'll have 2-3 guys on the same team, and that's a massive night right there. So it's something to keep an eye on that I'll definitely keep doing, but we'll see how the results pan out. And if it's not successful, then we'll just stop.
That's super interesting that you say all those factors. I never really thought about it that way, but pitcher's time to the plate, catcher's arm, the count. Is the guy throwing a fastball at 95 miles an hour? Is he throwing his big loopy curveball at 75 miles an hour?
Exactly.
And then you're also taking into account, used to do this all the time. A guy steals and he's like, gets the greatest jump of his life and he's, almost already at second base and I swing and foul the ball off and he has to go back to first. So
exactly.
that factor too.
Batter putting it in play as well. That's another factor. We've had two attempted stolen bases the past couple days where the batter just happens to put the ball in play. So that's also frustrating.
Let's switch gears here a little bit to what you do handicap on a daily basis. The stolen bases are awesome, and I love hitting those plus money winners, but where do you find value in a given day, and what are the bet types that you, one, enjoy the most, and two, really handicap the most?
Yeah, so I'm mainly a money line kind of guy. As someone who is in baseball, as you can probably attest to this, as someone who played baseball, teams really don't care about, and players really don't care about how many runs they win by, as long as they win. So I really don't like run lines that too much for that aspect. Then totals I will play, but not nearly as much. I've been a little skittish on totals ever since the 2 baseball scandal in Major League Baseball and using juice balls versus dead balls and not knowing when each ball is being put into play, because that would obviously be a massive factor if certain balls were being used for certain games. So I do still play totals, but I tend not to play as many. I'm mainly a money line guy, and that's why I like to play a lot of underdogs too, is because I think that if we're going to go up to minus 190, minus 200 with favorites, then we should go just as far with underdogs, probably even further. Like, for example, I will go plus 250, plus 300 on the money line if I like it, but I won't go, over minus 200, minus 210.
Something that you touched upon was run lines, and we were talking about this earlier today. It can be so tempting seeing the Tampa Bay Rays minus 190, but plus 125 on the run line. For somebody that crunches the numbers and knows the numbers, is there value to be had in grabbing that run line, or is it too often that these teams do end up winning, but just by 1 run?
So I look at it on both ways, right? So when I play underdogs, I don't play it on the run line either. So if I'm playing a favorite, I don't want to play it on the run line. I want to be consistent on both sides. And if I'm consistent both ways, then it should even itself out. Then it should even itself out. That being said, I think if you consistently play run lines, I think you're taking a lot of value away from your plays. And then especially an example like yesterday, so the Rays are at home, right? They come up in the bottom of the 8th, they have 1 run. All of a sudden, they are only up 1. They just want to close the game in the top, but they also don't get their bottom of the 9th at bats.
Super good point.
Exactly. So you're playing essentially an 8-inning game versus a 9-inning game in terms of score there. But the team doesn't care. If you're just going to win, then why it doesn't matter if you're only getting 8 at bats. It's obviously why you don't bat in the bottom of the inning. But it's something to think about for sure in terms of run lines.
In terms of the hottest bet in all of sports these days, the no runs first inning, yes run first inning, what are your thoughts on nerfies, and is it something that you could ever see yourself playing now or at any point down the line?
I think they're fun for like a quick bet and to get a result really fast. But as somebody who played baseball and has worked in baseball, I think that there's not much value in them. I think that they're a lot more luck than anything. Especially if I really just think they're a lot more luck, and for more people that don't really follow baseball as much. But that's just me. I understand how they're fun and everything, but I've got my niche and I know how to play. So I usually don't play yes run first inning, no run first inning, unless we're in the playoffs. I do get into a lot of props in the playoffs, and that's one of the props that I look at. But I need motivation is a big factor for me, and there's no motivation until you get to the playoffs, really.
It's truly a complete crapshoot, to your point. It's like you could be facing a team's ace and you knock him around, and then you could be facing the worst pitcher on the staff and he strikes out the side. It's like you really have a hard time actually predicting. And yes, there are models that can predict historical trends based off first inning, but
and it's kind of why I stay away from first fives in general as well. It's because
that
it's
was
kind
going to
of
be
just
my next question.
Yeah,
perfect.
it's kind of just an arbitrary number for me, right? So once again, teams do not care if they're winning. They definitely don't care if they're winning by the 5th inning or by the 4th inning or by the 3rd inning. Also, you have no idea where the lineup's going to come back up depending on the inning. I mean, usually you like to hope that the top of your lineup will get their 3rd at bats around the 5th inning, but sometimes they might not. Maybe certain batters are pitched around. So 5, like the 5 inning bets are just, it's such an arbitrary number for me. Also, you don't know if your starter is going to go 5 or 6 innings. Maybe you've got a couple of horses on the mound and you would rather bet the 6 innings because you think that your guy is going to go longer than their starter, and it's really the bullpens you're betting against. So first 5s, I will play them sometimes if I think there's a massive advantage. I also do think books really account for them in terms of lines, though. Mostly books make their lines because of starting pitchers. And that's what has the huge, massive difference. So we usually try to take advantage of that by fading teams that have their better starting pitcher going, or that's a worse team.
Yeah, the unpredictability of the end of the game, you don't know who's going to be pitching, you don't know who's going to be in the bullpen. If you think about football, basketball, whatever sport, it's the same team generally on the court at that given time. Baseball, you have no idea what bullpen arm is going to come in and throw. If I were one of your 12,000 followers or one of your hundreds of Dub Club subscribers, and I wanted to be like you and be able to crunch numbers and be able to even find these statistics, what tools do you use? What research websites? How do you even start going about crunching these numbers?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously the experiences you can't really get. So the experience is obviously very important because that determines how I think sometimes. But if someone wants to, I really like to use a database. A couple things that I mentioned earlier is I like to use weighted on base average when looking at lineups. I like to look at splits, left versus right. I like to look at bullpen ERA. So bullpen ERA is very important to me, as well as bullpen usage, because like you mentioned, I like to know who's pitching in the game, regardless of or who's going to be available. I like to think how a manager would think, and I'd like to put together, how he would pitch the game if he's winning, how he'd pitch the game if he's tied, how he's pitched the game if he's losing. So I think about all of those scenarios. And then a couple other things I look at are trends, seeing if a team's hot, seeing how the team's been pitching, and then matchup history as well. I don't make decisions based on matchup history, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. So there are so many factors I look at. Also, just knowing which starters you can trust, which starters have certain types of pitches that might work against certain teams, have certain pitches that you've seen work against other teams before that this pitcher maybe throws better than another pitcher. So there's so many factors that go into handicapping baseball. Traditional statistics, analytics, honestly everything. So it is a lot to think about.
The beautiful thing for anybody listening to this is that you don't have to find these tools and you don't have to do the analysis. All you have to do is subscribe to John on Dub Club and you'll have them all sent to you with this genius of a human being doing the research behind it. So, John, this was super insightful. Really appreciate you coming on. I know the listeners are going to thoroughly enjoy hearing how much time, effort, analysis, knowledge, experience goes into being a profitable handicapper over a 162 game season, or for college, a 50 and some change. So it's been super fun tailing you, and I really appreciate all the hard work that you do. And thank you once again for coming on.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
Dollar, 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 dollar.